Jeffrey Cole's going to join us here in a moment, and I don't know Jeffrey personally. I've met him once or twice, I believe, at this point. But I do want to let you guys know a little bit of unsolicited kind of salesmanship. He's one of the best speakers around. I'm interested to see, for those of you who haven't seen him speak before, the reaction, because he does a whole bunch of meaty topics, or he covers a whole bunch of meaty ground with relatively little aid. So with that setup, Jeffrey, if you could come join us to talk about television at a tipping point.
Nice introduction. Thank you. We actually, what I did is at the last summit, we had actually solicited some ideas for original research that people thought we should do. And we've done that. But as I started putting all that together, I found it fit into a couple of key categories. And so what I would rather do, rather than sound like a professor, and I haven't taught in 19 years, rather than sound like a professor, I thought I'd integrate it into a presentation. And then anyone who would like, and Josh, we can figure out how to do this, anyone who would like our annual or global reports and our monthly releases on some of this, happy to make it available. But what I want to talk about in the time I have is I think television and video really is at a tipping point. I want to look at 14 developments in the last year that I think have changed everything. And I think television has gone through the change. Depending on your point of view, that change could be either into puberty or into menopause. I'd prefer to think it's into puberty. But let's look at some of the things that have really happened in the last year that have totally transformed the television and video world. Starting with the Ted Cruz Award for Wasted Effort, which goes to Time Warner Cable in its fight against CBS. I think everybody understood what Time Warner was trying to do. They realize the average cable bill is about $85 a month. They know they're being hit by content providers, by the 4 broadcast networks, by ESPN, by all of these other services. They know that every year they are going to have to raise their rates, and they now know for the first time, every time they raise their rates by a minimum of 10% a year, there's going to be cord cutting. So they decided to hold the line against CBS, who was getting about 70 cents a month per subscriber, and wanted at the end of their contract to be at $2. I understand their desire to fight this, but I just don't know what they were thinking. They had no leverage in this war whatsoever. What were they planning to do? Go to their Time Warner subscribers and say, you can't have CBS? It was obvious that the content owners controlled everything. The cable companies had absolutely no leverage, and all they did was manage to alienate their customers, get them to hate them even a little bit more, if that's possible, and at the same time resulted in some cord cutting. So it was an absolute, we had seen these fights every year. We saw them last year between DirecTV and Viacom, but we never saw one so protracted that took the signal down in New York, Los Angeles, and Dallas, and it all accomplished absolutely nothing. The second trend that I think is really powerful, and it falls in the wake of the Time Warner CBS, Sony made a very cryptic announcement about 2 months ago that they had formed a distribution relationship with Viacom. Sony is making noises that it's going to sell video services over the top in competition with cable and satellite. Google is making the same noises. Intel is making the same noises. We're going to see some of the key players move into this space. The cable companies, the satellite companies are trying to insert into their contracts terms that say you can't sell. When they make a deal with ESPN or they make a deal with TNT, they're going to try to put in those contracts that you can't sell over the top. You only can sell to a cable or satellite company. That will probably be struck down by the courts if the content providers even agree to sign it, because they don't have to agree to sign it. Once again, if ESPN decides they don't want to abide by those terms, what is Comcast going to do? Go to its subscribers and say you can't have ESPN? Just accelerates the cord cutting. The third development, which I found very disappointing, at the upfronts this year, ABC announced with great fanfare they were going to stream the ABC television network live. Great development, meant everybody could watch ABC on their iPads or tablets or smartphones or internet-enabled television sets, and then they said, but you can only watch the app if you authenticate that you're a cable or satellite subscriber. They hitched their wagon to the old system. For those 60 cents a month, they mortgaged their future. We saw those great clips from Jimmy Kimmel just a couple of minutes ago. And if ABC would make their app available to anyone who wants to watch it, which is what ABC has done almost its entire history, made its signal available to anyone in the US who wanted to watch it, people wouldn't have to go to YouTube, people wouldn't have to go to other places. They could watch not just the clips, but the entire shows. I think ABC made a terrible mistake by basically aligning itself with the old system rather than showing themselves really progressive and moving into the new system. Fourth trend, HBO went over the top in the Nordic countries, this country, in Sweden, Finland, Norway, and Denmark. Of course, they were able to do that because they had no pre-existing relationships with cable companies they would offend, but I think we're getting very close. Jeff Bewkes will tell you I'm wrong. I think we're getting very close to HBO going over the top in the US. If not HBO, it'll be Showtime. If not Showtime, it'll be TNT, even though it's owned as HBO and TNT, both owned by Time Warner. But I think HBO's finding it can't grow in a universe where cable subscriptions not only are growing, but they're shrinking, not rapidly, but slowly. And I think they're going to want to reach the entire audience. I think they're going to want to reach the customers who are never going to get a television set, who are watching only through tablets or computers or other systems. And I think they make more money going over the top. HBO, $15 a month, about half of to the consumer, about half of that goes to the cable company, about half of that goes to HBO. They make about $7.50 a month. Over the top, they won't discuss these numbers. These are my numbers. I suspect they'll go over the top at about 12 bucks. At 12 bucks, they make an extra $4.50 a month. Consumer saves $2.50 a month, and I think they go from 30 million subscribers to 50 million subscribers. And it will offend the cable companies, but once again, what are they going to do? Is Comcast going to go to its 27 million subscribers and say, now you can't have HBO? Every time they try that, once again, they accelerate the cord cutting. They have no leverage. Fifth trend, Netflix. Netflix watched HBO very closely. Netflix saw that HBO was transformed from a reasonably successful cable channel that showed uncut, uninterrupted theatrical films much more rapidly than they could be shown on television. That's what HBO was for about 18 years. But what transformed HBO from showing uncut, uninterrupted theatricals into a major force in content was producing original content. We saw that 11, 12 years ago with Sopranos, Sex and the City, 6 Feet Under, and now HBO up at 30 million subscribers with Game of Thrones, True Blood, Girls. Netflix saw that, and they wanted to transform themselves from a streaming service that showed theatricals, not quite as recent theatricals as HBO does, and television shows into a vital service. Netflix also wanted to recover from a self-inflicted wound 2 years ago that almost destroyed it, did destroy 90% of its stock value at the time, when it cut the company in two and separated the red envelope business, which they called Quickster, a little footnote that will live forever as one of the stupidest names for a company. And the streaming service, but Netflix recovered, and we've never seen a case study of anyone not just recovering, but surpassing where they were after such a self-inflicted wound, and decided they wanted to go into the original content business. Their first effort, Lilyhammer, was not very successful. Their second effort, House of Cards, earlier this year, hugely successful. And then Arrested Development, bringing back a show, a cult show that had been off the air for years. And then Orange is the New Black, enormously successful. And then the most interesting thing, as you all know about Netflix, the decision to make all of the episodes available at once. Many of us have become binge viewers. I'm a binge viewer of Mad Men and Homeland, but it takes a lot of work for me to be a binge viewer. I have to record every episode. I have to check every week to make sure the beginning and the end are there. I have to make sure nobody erases those for 13 weeks, and then I can sit down and watch them all at once. Netflix released every single episode, as you well know, all at once. A lot of people said that's foolish, because all you really have to do, and it's true, all you really have to do if you have a couple weeks off at summer is buy Netflix for 1 month at $7.99. You can sit down and watch House of Cards, Orange is the New Black, Arrested Development, and all of the other movies you can fit in, and then you could cancel the subscription, having gotten all of that for $8. But Netflix isn't very worried about that. You've probably noticed that HBO Go and Netflix are well aware that people are sharing passwords. They know it's estimated that as many as 4 to 5 people may be using the password for each of those services. And they're not really very concerned. They're not trying to crack down on that because they know they're like heroin dealers passing out free samples. And they want people to get used to it. And then at some point, they will come in and they will tighten the system because they know that the person who's borrowing the Netflix password or the HBO Go password becomes an addict. And then at some point, they will pay the $7.99, or right now for HBO Go, the only way you get it is by being a cable or satellite subscriber. And yet most of the HBO Go subscribers aren't watching it on HBO, they're watching it on HBO Go. Next trend was the fact that Netflix this year was nominated for an enormous amount of Emmy awards. Actually won 1 for director, but showed just as cable in the beginning didn't feel it could get the respect from the Emmys that broadcast television did, and cable had to create its own awards. Some of you may remember the Cable ACE Awards. And then all of a sudden, when cable began to dominate the Emmy Awards for dramas and miniseries and special events, they killed the Cable ACE because they didn't need them anymore. Well, it turns out there isn't going to be a need for a streaming award because in its very first year of producing streaming content, Netflix gets a bunch of nominations and actually, as I said, wins 1. 7th key trend this year, and this has all been in the last 12 months, Amazon now producing original content. And this makes Netflix very nervous. Jeff Bezos really does, well, back up for a second. I think if you really want to see the successor to Steve Jobs as the smartest guy in the room, the guy who can see around corners and whose personality is every bit as unpleasant, it's not Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, it's Jeff Bezos. And Jeff Bezos is planning to take over the world. Not just everything he's doing in e-commerce, and in e-commerce they're now selling not just music and books, they're selling toothpaste, deodorant, floss, batteries. Half the diapers in America are sold online. Bezos is putting increasing numbers of businesses out of business. Just one example, you think back 15 years ago, one of the biggest movies of the year was You've Got Mail with Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan. Meg Ryan in her last cute role. And Really saddens me to say that. I mean, I love Meg. Who could not love Sally and When Harry Met Sally and whatever her name was in Sleepless in Seattle and You've Got Mail? But in You've Got Mail, she owned a little mom and pop bookstore. Tom Hanks' family was really Barnes and Noble, but they gave them a fictitious name. They gave them the name Fox. They were the predators. She was the prey. It didn't take 15 years. It took 10 years. She's long gone. And now the predator, the chain bookstore, is the prey as Borders has disappeared, Barnes and Noble hanging by a thread. Bezos is putting a long list of companies out of business. Next on the list will be the corner drugstore, the Duane Reade, the Rite Aid, the Walgreens. That's 1/3 of his plan to take over the world. The second third is devices and content. You know, if you're an Amazon Prime subscriber, you do it for the second day delivery, but you get thousands of hours of television and film. And the third way he's trying to take over the world is Amazon Web Services, which does the back end for Netflix, for the CIA, much of the American government, foreign governments. Well, now Amazon Prime, which most people view as free because it's an add-on to the shipping service, is now doing what HBO and Netflix did, producing original content. My cousin, very successful television writer, producer, created and run shows for Fox and NBC, now creating original television shows for Amazon Prime. And they're going to go head-to-head with Netflix, with old content and new content. Netflix very reasonably priced at $7.99. Amazon Prime even more reasonably priced at basically free, since most people are getting it for the shipping. A real potential problem for Amazon Prime. An eighth trend, and a really interesting one to me, Steven Spielberg went to the USC Film School about 3 months ago, and he was talking about the fact that Lincoln came this close to being an HBO television movie. And keep in mind, at the same time, Behind the Candelabra, which was an HBO television movie, was a theatrical in much of the rest of the world. And the point is, the line between television and film is blurring. Theatrical will always be the $200 million spectacles, but the character-driven stories, the line between when they're theatricals and when they're HBO or Netflix movies is thinning and blurring, very much so. And at that same event, George Lucas was sitting next to Spielberg, and Lucas was talking about, they were talking about the failure of The Lone Ranger and some of the other hugely expensive films this year, Pacific Rim. And Lucas was talking about, in the future, it may cost $150 to see a theatrical, as much of this moves to television. I don't think he's right about the $150, but it reminded me of something about 15 years ago when Edgar Bronfman took over Universal. He said, it doesn't make sense. I'll use today's examples. He used examples in the 90s. It doesn't make sense that you pay the same ticket price to see Iron Man 3, which costs $200 million, as you do to see Paranormal 3, which Paranormal itself costs less than $1 million. And he got laughed at for that, but I think that's an interesting idea that may come back. A ninth trend, CBS running Under the Dome. Under the Dome was significant for two reasons. One, it showed there's still life left at the networks in the summer if they run interesting, compelling programs. The networks have basically written off summer for the last few years with just reality shows and reruns, but it shows you create a high-quality original drama, the audience is there. The other thing we saw with Under the Dome, further showing the silliness of Time Warner, is when Time Warner subscribers, and I live in Los Angeles and New York, I was blacked out in both cities, that Time Warner subscribers who had started, were into episode 6 of Under the Dome, could go to Amazon Prime. Under the Dome ran on Monday night. You could see that episode Friday on on Amazon Prime, they went to Amazon Prime to watch the episode of Under the Dome, further showing them that they didn't really need cable. Very silly. 10th, everybody already has said content is king. I spoke at the last Videonomics, and I share the content is king. I made my comment 6 months ago where I said not only is content king, but in a digital world where there's never been so much good content, never been so much bad content, I argue, pardon the incorrect grammar, content is kinger than it has ever been. If you want proof of that, I'll give you 100 examples. I'll just give you one. NBC. As you know, the television season runs from September to May. Last December, I was visiting a couple of my friends who run NBC, and they were smiling. To everyone's surprise, to many people's shock, they had finished the first 3 months of the season in #1. But my friends were saying to me, even though we've had a great fall, we'll never stay #1. We're going to fall to #3 by the end of the season. They said the reason they were going to fall to #3 was 2 reasons. One, that damned NFL won't play football when the weather is good. Of course, what they meant was football had just ended in December, and they weren't going to get it back till August. So they had lost football, and their one genuine hit, The Voice, was on hiatus. Well, it turned out they finished the season not at #1, but at #5, behind Univision. That's how important 2 programs took them, or the loss of 2 programs made them fall from #1 to #5. Interestingly, NBC is #1 again so far this fall because they have The Voice and they have NFL. Of the top 15 shows of the new season, 13 are NFL football games. That's how compelling programming is. It also makes you wonder what the NFL is eventually going to do with those football games. The only content that can aggregate live audiences at the same time, well, with a few exceptions, is sports. And within sports, nobody does it better than the NFL. So it makes you wonder if the NFL will go over the top at some point, although they're making so many billions of dollars from the broadcast networks. 11th trend, 2013 is the year, finally, that tablets surpassed PCs in sales. When the tablet came out, my job was to look at this thing and say, is this the 4th screen or does it replace the 2nd? We firmly believe it replaces the 2nd. We think the PC is going away except for 4 to 6% of the population. The 4 to 6% who will continue to use PCs, computer-assisted designers, heavy-duty number crunchers, big writers, college students while they're in college. Tablets are replacing PCs except for 6% of the people. I don't know anyone, and I bet this describes a lot of you and me, I don't know anyone who has a PC or a laptop and a tablet when they're going on a trip, business trip, doesn't look at their laptop and then look at their tablet and then look back at their laptop and say, can I leave you at home? And what we're really saying is, I want to leave you at home, but what do I have to do? A 12th trend, Chromecast. Chromecast, I think many of you are familiar. In case you're not, Google's $35 USB attachment that lets you stream from your smartphone or to your tablet right onto your television set. You don't need Roku, you don't need Apple TV, you need a $35 dongle that just snaps in and all of a sudden you're streaming. A major change for how we're going to get good content or different content onto television. 13th trend, Apple. In his biography of Steve Jobs, Walter Isaacson said, Jobs' influence will be on everything that comes out of Apple for 24 months. So therefore, the 5C and the 5S, according to Isaacson, was envisioned by Jobs. We hit month 24 last week. we may be at the end. There may be no more Steve Jobs directly inspired technology. I hope not. But the most interesting thing to come out of Isaacson's biography was the fact that a month before he died, Jobs called Isaacson up with the incredibly interesting cryptic comment. A month before he died, he told Isaacson, "I finally cracked television." And the hope, the excitement is that sometime in the near future, there's going to be an actual Apple television set, which of course will just look like a big iPad or a very big iPhone, and that Apple will once again come out with a game changer. And sadly for Apple, that's the standard they're now being held to. The 5S, the 5C were incremental improvements. Stock price went way down. I made a wrong prediction. My prediction rate's usually pretty good. I didn't think people were going to line up this time for the 5S and the 5C. They did. I guess they just liked the social environment and the fun of lining up. I didn't think these devices warranted. I suspect I'll be right in the long term, and that's not me covering my ass. I think I'll be right. I think ultimately sales of the 5S and the 5C will not be as strong as other devices, but we'll see. But they did line up. But there may be an Apple television set. But Apple now being held to the standard of game changer, and that's an unfair standard. They've already created 3 game changers in the iPod, the iPad, and the iPhone, and nobody's done that, and we don't know if there's a 4th game changer. And lastly, Verizon is now reclaiming or trying to reclaim net neutrality. Net neutrality has been dormant for a while. Now Verizon's going to court trying to eliminate the Federal Communications Commission ability to regulate them, and they're doing that for a very important reason. I think if you talk to the heads of the cable, if you talk to the heads of the cable companies or you talk to the heads of the telcos, they will tell you their future is not in delivering television services. Their future is in broadband. That's why AT&T and Verizon have weaned us off of unlimited mobile broadband. The cable companies are trying to start to wean us off of unlimited wired broadband. It drives AT&T and Verizon and the cable companies crazy that Netflix is making all of this money off of their infrastructure. They will tell you appropriately, they spend billions of dollars wiring the country, and according to Nielsen and others, at prime time, 30% of internet traffic is Netflix. About 60% is online video, but 30% is Netflix, and it drives them crazy that Google and Netflix and YouTube are making all this money off of their infrastructure. They want to charge tolls. If they succeed, you'll see Netflix, I think, immediately jump from $7.99 a month to $16 a month. Now, they can survive that because remember, Netflix did fine when it was $17 a month in the red envelope business, but we're all going to pay a lot more as the cable companies and the telcos lose their profitability in the video delivery service. And not a trend, but just one more thing to keep in mind as we talk about these services and how much money is made and how successful they are. Just remember to compare that to a development in the last month when Grand Theft Auto came out and in about a week made $1 billion. Thank you very, very much. I'm sticking around all day, happy to talk about any or all of this, and it's really a pleasure to be here at Videonomics.
Thank you, Jeffrey.